Hello 8th graders, this video is for the optional statistical analysis section of your science fair project. During this video I'm going to show you how to generate the data tables for this section and put them into your graphs, or into your report rather. So the first thing that I want to start with is explaining why you might want to include this in your project. Not only does it make your project more complete in that you're including things that people might be interested in knowing when they're seeing your project and trying to understand what it is that you did for your project, but it also gives you a good way to report on how good your data is. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that as we go step by step. So first thing that I'm going to point out is this is from the document that you received in class for all the instructions for this section of your report. And I'm going to show you how to do each of these steps. So first thing I'm going to do is head on back to our Google spreadsheet, and I've got all of the same data that was there from the previous video when we did the averages and the graphs. What we're going to do is we're going to make another data table, and I'm going to kind of use a lot of the parts and pieces that we've already finished out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top row from our original data table, and I'm going to copy that down here for our third data table. And in this one I don't need trials, so I'm going to delete that box. And I'm going to add a few things. So the things that you need in here are mean, median, we need mode, and we need range. Now the reason why we're doing this in the spreadsheet and not just making a table over in our document here with our results section is because we're going to have the computer do all the math for us. That's, after all, why we have them. So the first thing that we're going to do is the mean, and that's the exact same thing as the average. So that's kind of nice. I can take this section, copy, and I'm going to paste it right into our spreadsheet. And I'm going to fix those numbers here in just a second to make them a little bit more clean. But I'm going to go down to median next. In order to calculate our median, what you have to do is you have to tell the computer that you want it to do an equation. So I'm going to hit the equal keys, and I'm going to just start typing in median. When I type in MED, median comes up as my only choice. I pick it, and now it wants to know the median for what. And so I've already got all of my data up here for wing shape 1. I'm going to highlight all of those cells, close my parentheses, and then hit enter. But before I do, I want to point out what it looks like. It says median, so the computer knows it's going to do a median for the cells B3 all the way through B12. So I hit enter, and it gives me my median. Just like before when I was doing the averages, I can take this cell and copy it to these and then paste it to these other two cells, and what it'll do is it'll do the median for all the cells up in these two columns here. And you can check that if you want by clicking on that cell, and look, it says the median of C3 all the way through C12, and that's exactly what we wanted. Same thing for the median on wing shape 3, all the D cells. Now I want to take a pause here for just a second and explain the importance of why we do this. So the way that I'm going to show you that is by showing you this example. Let's say that you had a graph that looked like this, and if you had a graph where all of the data that you collected pretty much centered around one focal point in the middle with some stuff lower and some of your data being higher, your mean is a really good indicator of the central tendency, is what they call it. Like, what is everything kind of gathering around? Well, let's say that your data is less pretty. If you were to take your data and you found that your data had something like this, where most of your data points are kind of clustered around one area, but you've got a bunch of outliers. If you took the mean of this data, what you get is some number right here on the graph where you actually don't have any data points, but that's where your average or your mean comes out. You don't have much of a central tendency anymore. Your data doesn't generally fall on this area. So your median becomes a lot more useful here. If you calculate out the median, you're finding the middle number, and so you're going to find something that's a little bit more meaningful. So what you can do with your data is when you look at your data and you find that your means and your medians are pretty close together, like my numbers are here, these ones are right on top of each other, you know that either number is going to be a useful indicator of your central tendency. So if your mean and your median are very different from each other, it means probably that you have some outliers. And that's interesting information. So now let's go on to the mode. In order to calculate the mode, it's very similar to the last two calculations. You do an equal sign, start typing in mode, and there's our choice there. It again asks you for what cells do you want to know. I highlight the ones that I want. Just to double check, B3 through B12, that's exactly what we want. I'm going to copy that cell and paste it for my other two wing types, and it gives me my mode as well. The last one that I'm going to do is my range, and this one is a little bit trickier. You're going to have to make the computer do a little extra math, and you have to be very careful with what you type in. So here's how you do it. For the range, what we want to do is we want to know what's the difference between our biggest number and our smallest number, like what's the spread on all of our data. If you have a really, really big range, it probably means that when you were collecting your data, there might have been a little bit of sloppiness, or there was maybe some control variable that you didn't control for. You know that you have some pretty good data if you have a small range, and so that's why we do this one. And so here's how you're going to do it. What we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer, find the biggest number and subtract the smallest number. So it's going to have kind of a couple of steps. Like always, though, we start out with the equal sign, so we want it to do an equation. And what we're going to do is we want it to find the max, or the biggest number. And it's just like before, it wants to know the max of what. So I go back up to my data. I'm going to select all of the same cells, and then I'm going to close the parentheses. And this is the step that you don't want to forget. So we want it to find the max of those things, but we have to put a parenthesis around everything from max all the way through. So it should look just like what you see on my screen right here. So we've got a parenthesis, max, another parenthesis, and then I'm telling it what cells, and then I have to close both of those parentheses. So you should have 2 at the end here. Now we're going to say, all right, find that max and subtract, so minus sign. I'm going to make this time the min, so I want it to find the min, or the minimum is what that stands for, the smallest. Same from that same range, so I'm going to start up there and highlight down. So B3 through B12. Close that first parenthesis, and just like before, I have to add some parentheses around min. So I make one there, and I make one there, and again, double check that you have all the right parentheses in there, and what you're telling the computer is find the biggest number and then subtract the smallest number, and what you should end up with is the range, or the amount of space between those two numbers. I hit enter, and my range for this data set is 3. Now, just like with all the calculations, we can grab that cell, copy it, and it's going to paste that same information, but for these other cells, and we have the ranges all the way across. So it looks like for my first wing shape, I wasn't as good at collecting data as I was for wing shape 2 and 3, because my range is a lot tighter, or a lot smaller for those two wing shapes. Now that I've got this new data table, I'm going to copy it, Control C, and I've got to go back to my document. And the place where this belongs is right in between my first data table, or my first graph with all of my trials in it, and before my average flight, my averages. So I'm going to paste that in there. Oh, actually, we're not going to paste that yet. There's one thing we forgot to fix. So remember how I told you I was going to fix these with all the decimal points? This looks messy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight those two squares, and there's this option here to decrease the number of decimal places. I want to do that. I'm going to take it down so that there are no decimal places. I just want the whole numbers here. So now I'm going to take these cells, copy that table, go back over here, in between my two graphs that I've already made, paste that, and what you have is a beautiful table with all your statistical analysis. Good luck.